Hi, Lynn Kenyon, Everything Montana Real Estate. Thank you for joining us today. And Joe Seipel, appraiser extraordinaire, many years background in appraising. And this is a really important video, like all of these, as we've talked about, just understanding what the whole process is, whether you're the buyer or the seller. If you're the buyer, why is he charging me this to appraise the house? For the seller, why did my value come in? Why did it not come in? All these aspects and what he's looking for and where that number comes from. It's not just, he doesn't pick it out of the sky. It's not an online estimate. It is based on a lot of very serious factors. Appraisers are really hard school. From what I've told, you've got to apprentice, and it's very involved. You don't just go get an online appraiser accreditation. So Joe will walk us through. We said, show us on a typical appraisal on this house here where you would start. What would you do when you showed up? So Joe, what would you do when you show up?
Okay, we've just arrived. So what we do initially is we take some photos on the outside from the street to get the view both ways. The reason we take pictures both ways, years ago you may have done a conventional appraisal and you just needed one street photo. These days, if you're doing an FHA or VA, they like to see the photos from both directions. So we're taking many more photos to document the process. So we would start out here. We wouldn't do a lot out here until we go to the door and introduce ourselves to the homeowner. And we typically would hand the homeowner a business card so they know who we are, and then go through the process of measuring the house and then walking through the house. So in that process, we'll just go out to the street for a second. We have a digital camera. Appraisers carry a little digital camera typically. I'll snap a couple photos right and left, and I'll shoot a picture of the house. We'll go to the house, to the garage area, and do a quick measurement, talk measurement for a second.
Okay.
Take a photo this direction.
Joe, if you've got acreage, you're not going to do a tape measure. What do you do there?
On acreage, we don't measure the lot size. We get the plats. So we'll get a plat that shows the dimensions or the detail on the lots or on the acreage.
Okay.
And we'll have that. And sometimes, depending on the quality of the acreage, we may go do a site check to see what they have in terms of ponds or creeks, or how much.
That's to value.
Right. Well, how much of the ground's buildable, and how much. Then we'll take a photo here, and at this point, the homeowner generally doesn't know we're here. Then we'll walk to the door.
Okay.
And here's the homeowner here, and he's come out. So we'll give him a card and say, "Hey, hi, my name's Joe. Nice to meet you." And me too. And then we'll stop here and we'll talk a little bit. I said, we got to take some measurements of the garage and the outside and take some photos, and we'll walk through. And usually, appraiser will have somebody with them, but sometimes the homeowner even likes to hold the tape. We go measure the garage because it's right there.
So the point is that square footage has a big impact on the value.
Has a huge impact on the value. So that's 24 feet. And then we typically will have a pad with us where we do a drawing of the garage and the house, and we put the dimensions down. Now, in the last few years, they created a little measurement tool called ANSI. So what they want is they want the measurements down to the 1/10 of a foot. So if this is 24 and a half, we need to get that on there. This one turned out to be 24. Then we'll measure the interior and then measure around the house, which we won't do today because we're going to start walking through.
So I think the big thing for our viewers is value, obviously, number one.
Okay.
Or, how are you, other than square footage, what are you looking at today to come up to arrive at a value, regardless of what the buy-sell says and what the agreed-upon price is?
Okay, we get some background before we come out, so we have the property record information. So we have an idea what kind of house it is, like a ranch style here today. We have an idea that it has a 2-car garage, and then we're looking for porches and decks and other amenities and that type of thing. Here we would take a picture of the garage because these days they would like to see photos of pretty much every room and every angle. So if you're doing an FHA or VA appraisal, we take the sides of the house because and sometimes we've had an order go from conventional to go to a FHA. So if you're out here and you're 50 miles from home, you better have taken it even though it's conventional because it might have been switched to an FHA.
That's smart.
So then go ahead.
When you're looking, so this house, let's say it's a VA, because obviously this market here, a lot of Montana is driven by military veteran kind of loans. RD loans, which is a rural development loan. We talked about those in earlier episodes. What here would you be looking for if this was a VA loan or an FHA loan?
Okay. On VA and FHA, any conventional, you still want to look. You want to take and have a little ladder with you or with the owner here and take a peek into the attic because they want to look at attic. There's a reasonable insulation up there. Well, they want to know that you take a photo of it and you can look up here. Usually houses of this age probably have adequate insulation in them because somebody would be telling you that their utility bills are way out of line. But you want to know, usually this on a ranch style, there's usually an attic access in the garage or in the house in the hallway there. And then if you have a partial basement, you want to take a peek in the crawl space.
What about no rail here?
The way that works is it's a safety requirement from the platform to the ground if it's over 30 inches. However, the way
over 30 inches, it has to have a.
Yeah, if the platform's up here and it's more than 30 inches, you got to have railing. But I've actually required it when it was about 2 inches because somebody in a Belgrade house had a doorway, and out there they put a huge rock. So if some little toddler comes out and bangs her head on that, it says, you're not going to move the rock. You need to put some railing there. So it's a safety thing, and this is a little bit of a safety thing here. Somebody should put something up there, and there are usually some slats.
Yep.
Go with the railing.
So it doesn't matter how far the slats are.
Well, this again, you want to look at what the construction codes are, because you don't want somebody's head stuck in there if it's too tight, and if it's too far, then they can go through it. So you're working for just standard building requirements on those types of things.
So number one, we think is on VA, FHA, RD loans, shipping and billing paint.
Yes.
Shipping and billing paint, and why is that?
Usually it's because of the age of the house, but because of lead-based paint possibilities. But they like to have paint surfaces scraped. There's shipping, peeling paint, and repainted.
Is that inside and outside?
It's outside.
Only outside. And then you have to pick up the chips too, right? Isn't that part of it?
Yeah, they want to properly dispose of stuff.
Yeah, so you can't leave the chips on the ground. So those are some of the things. What else would a buyer be looking for, that knowing that, or a seller too, that when they sell their house, let's make sure it's VA ready?
You're going to be looking at the heating, electrical, plumbing. There's issues with those types of things, but we can go in the house and look at some of that. But before we do that, maybe we should take a peek around the outside I don't know if he said we could go to the backyard.
So I heard VA is always health and safety. So
yeah,
they're looking out for the health and safety of their veterans. So anything that looks like it's going to be a dangerous scenario.
This is color locked masonite, and this stuff's still held up. In fact, they don't even do this version, the color lock version, anymore. They had problems with it, I think, down south. But if you look on here, it looks like, and there's metal for soffit fascia areas. So it looks pretty clear. They didn't have any VA repair requirements, did they? No, it's pretty clear.
So that kind of covers that part of it. So now we go back into the real crux of it, is the value.
Okay.
So what are you going to do to show what's this one? 5, probably. So
how much did you pay for it when you bought it?
$320.
yeah, it's 5. So you're going to go in and you're going to say, okay, so you've got to buy sell for $500,000. Pick a number. And now what do you do? How do you prove that this is worth it? How do you assess that or said it's worth?
Yeah, the appraiser doesn't appraise to the selling price. Doesn't make any difference to the appraiser. They're essentially coming in, and what happens is we try to bracket the features So in other words, if it's a 1,800 square foot house, we try to have a house that's a similar size, a little less, maybe a little more. We try to use same style houses, ranch style. We look at houses that have similar updating and similar features. Like this house, does it have a sprinkler system? Does it have central air? Is it a fenced yard? Those types of things.
Granite, how much does granite come into play of fancy high-end finishes?
Those come in typically under quality condition. So this would be an average quality house. Looks like it's been updated on the inside, so it's probably a good condition. So we'll take a peek in there.
So then, how far can the subject be? So this is the subject. Now you're comparing it to other houses. Can I go to Conrad and compare a house up there?
No, we don't go outside the immediate neighborhood area for a house like this.
So is there a mileage number that you can't go?
There isn't a number in concrete, but what happens is for a sub-neighborhood like this, it's typically within a mile or so.
Correct.
There will be ranch-style sales, but you may find situations where you go further out 3 miles. Say this is a really done-up property, and at a certain in the sub-neighborhood, you might go further out.
So having sold a lot of rural property, that can be a problem, trying to find a comp.
Very hard in rural properties. Sometimes you're going to competing small towns. So, for example, if I'm doing Cascade, I just did a home in Cascade, and it was selling for close to 400, and it had a lot of updating and had a big garage and had great views in the mountains. There were no manufactured home sales in Cascade that would work for that. So you have to go out, and usually we try to do within 20 miles or so, and it might be less, might be more. So you may have a comp that's in Belt, Montana. You may have a comp that's in Ulm, Montana. You go with Cascade because it's competing small towns with similar influence.
So then you submit this to an underwriter. You come up with your evaluation, you submit it to the lender, and then their underwriters look at it. Is that how that works?
In the last 10, 20 years, it's changed that most of our appraisals go to an appraisal management company. There was a number of years ago where the lenders were separated from the appraisers directly for the most part, just because of pressures and stuff like that.
2008, things changed quite a bit.
So, right, they required a market conditions addendum, so you show listed properties. With the 3 sold sales that are on the URA or appraisal form, there'll be a couple listing comps to show that there's listings in the market. And most of our reports are sent to a portal for an appraisal management company. They have their own portals. They then deal with the lender, and then the lender deals directly with the borrower.
Let's say it's worth 5. That's what the buy-sell says. And you come in at 450, and this is a VA loan. Tell us about what happens then, because this only in VA loans does this happen.
It's called a tidewater procedure, where what happens is there's contact that I make to the lender and or the realtor to say, my value is this, it's under the selling price. Do you have any additional information or comps that I should consider in your opinion? And if there's nothing else, at times what will happen, the price that I value at is less than the selling price, and they deal with that.
Okay, so I'm a listing agent, and I know Charlie next door sold his house by owner for this price. But he could discount it because it was by owner. You didn't have to pay crazy realtor fees. So then can I say, okay, Joe, I know you can't find comps for this. I have one next door. It's a great comp. Can I call him and say this is what he sold for?
We typically don't, because they're not exposed to the market in the same way that MLS sales are. I used to run property tax for the Department of Revenue in Cascade County. There's a realty transfer form. Those sales come in, and they have to be verified. You know, what went in the sale? Did somebody trade a boat in that sale? What happened? When did it happen? With MLS, it's buyers and sellers exposed to the market. Those are the sales we mostly use. To use a sale that's non-MLS, we'd have to have a closing statement and comments from buyers and sellers of that. What went on with that?
Arm's length transaction.
To prove it was arm's length.
So don't expect that you're going to go just because your neighbor sold. How do you feel about these, the Zestimates, all these online evaluations? I, as an agent, hear them all the time. Well, Zillow has my house at this. And then you come in and go, yeah, but Zillow doesn't have all the factors. What's your perspective? Is a very high level appraiser with lots of training?
Typically, we don't hear a whole lot about it. Somebody will mention it, but Zillow and those online don't have the data stuff that material we work with, or the experience in the market, and it's limited. And I've seen some numbers of way out and way low and way high.
So you can't use that as a.
We don't use any Zillow or any of those sources for anything.
Yeah, you just make your own based on. And it's a very rigorous program to be an appraiser.
It's a couple thousand hours of training hours.
1,000 hours.
Yeah, with a certified appraiser, and then it's a bunch of tests and coursework, and you have to get a trainee's license now. And it probably takes a year or two for most people to do it.
And we need them desperately.
And it's hard to get in, and then once you're in, you have to be able to do it. I used to tell people, you can take the test and do all the things to get that, but once you have that piece of paper, whether you can do this work. And there's been times where we do 50, 60, 70, 80 appraisals a month. We travel some years 30, 40,000 miles. And there's not a lot of people willing to do that.
Yeah, it's same thing in real estate everywhere. So anything else in this house that would, so you're just saying it's kind of a standard home with not a lot of upgrades and.
Well, it looks like there's been some upgrades. You can tell it's not the original for a lot of it, but if you're doing FHA and VA, you want to sometimes turn on faucets, look under sinks, to check that everything's working and things are draining okay. So you would turn that on. If you're doing FA, required to test all the built-ins, not the refrigerator, but the dishwasher is built in, so you turn it on for a minute or two to see that it runs.
Interesting. I know that on FHA. Water. Who wants to test the water for a rural property?
Well, you're not testing it you're just testing, turning it on to see it works and that there's not leaks.
No quality, like bacteria and that sort of thing, nitrates. Yep. When do you test the water?
In the rural properties, there's usually requirements to have it tested. Yeah.
Wells only.
Yeah, and they're recorded and all that.
Okay, so do you do that then?
No, we don't do that. We may require, say you got into a situation, you knew that the septic was a problem and it needed to be checked, or you had odors, or you had weight. I did an appraisal once. I went over the hill to the house and I said, what do you have for a septic? And he looked around at me and he said, we just have a holding tank. And it had to be a subject to appraisal because the lender wasn't going to lend on a holding tank. So you run into those kinds of situations.
So you having the seller there, you were able to ask. Otherwise, how would you know?
In that situation, you'll be able to see whether there was a septic tank by drain field and by some of the outside things. But and you'll see a wellhead for the well, and you really don't know. If the well's 100 feet or 300 feet, unless there's some background on the well, and there should be data on the testing and that type of thing. But
so that's not really value; that's more the condition for the lender. So you have two parts in these appraisals: condition on certain kind of loans that's not in bad shape. They're going to use this as security, and then that the value's there. So if the lender got it back, he'd be able to sell it.
Right. Right. They want to know the collateral is saleable, and the estimate we put on it should be able to take in, if it got into a bad situation, like somebody took the property and caused damage or whatever. And there have been some of those situations over the years.
I'm sure. So one of the things that has happened since the 2008 is this group, you're saying, it goes out, you take the appraisals you want that you can think you can do with your timeline. So as a buyer, I go to whatever bank I go to, I don't get to choose you. I don't say, oh, I saw Joe on this video, I want Joe. That's not allowed.
Very little of that these days. Back prior to the 2008-9, there were short lists that certain banks use certain people than other ones. Appraisal management company stuff has gotten to a point where they put an order out, people typically will bid on it. And then there's some people in the appraisal management world that want, I do some appraisals out of ranches at Bell Creek, the properties, and they ask for me because there's not a lot of people that will deal with those.
Sure. Commercial, how does that change? What does that do? If you're evaluating a business, you're not looking at shipping and peeling paint, you're looking at...
Well, there's a different set of forms with commercial. There's more narrative that goes on. You're looking at similar things. You're looking at quality and condition and amenities and that type. Commercial, you see more of income approach come in. You'll see...
Income approach meaning what they make. So if you're a successful restaurant, you're going to evaluate it higher because the value's higher because they're making money as opposed to boarded up restaurant that's not even in business.
And we do some income approach typically with rental property because they'll give you income and expense information on a fourplex as an example. And that's another area. Commercial, sometimes they won't give it to you. And I just did a bar in a small town up in the Glacier area and very seasonal, and it had a lot of no information on income and expense, kind of who knows how it's run type of thing. So what you do there is you're looking at comparables at other small bars and small towns and what their sold price per square foot is. And within that is the bundle that they have a liquor license. So when somebody bought it for $400,000, they bought that little 2,000 square foot old bar with a little historic value, but it had, it had a liquor license. And people come out, maybe they were in Glacier Park and they come to this little small town, and instead of paying whatever they pay high price in a big hotel in Glacier, they go to this little hole in the wall. So you have some of that. Right.
So you're looking at income, you're looking at just maybe replacement cost, what the building would cost.
Right.
And then do you look at comparatives for that? And
all the time we look at, usually the value is based on direct sales, the comparison approach.
So 3-prong really.
Right. And the cost approach is a little more difficult to get a reasonable value because you have to come up with depreciation, and that's tough for some of these old buildings. But the one I did in that small town recently, it was mainly based on the direct sales comparison approach.
Interesting. So totally different. If you're talking commercial, that's a complete different. The most of our viewers are going to be residential, but it is, I get a lot of investors. They've done well. They have equity in their house. They want to go and invest in something now. And so they go outside of what they've done in the past.
And on residential, the loans are usually about 80%. In commercials, it might be only 50-60% because there's more risk going on in that operation.
Yeah, per the lender. Yeah, we've talked about that with some of our other videos. That it's not 0% down over 30 years. Those are much different loans.
Right.
So the bank's going to be a little bit more conservative, that they're not investing in business that's not going to make it, and now they've got the property back. That's not what they want.
Correct.
For sure. Interesting. Well, thank you. Anything else we should know about on this one that you would be looking at? Like a view. Here's a great example. A view. Do you give a value to a view?
We try to compare it to the other ranch styles up in, this is called Bellevue Palisades, that have some view amenity. And
All aspects, not just the square footage, but other things that add.
Yeah, it's a bundle of features and amenities. And the main ones are square footage and age and quality and condition and that type of thing. But there's also whether or not it's been updated, whether or not this is a Formica counter versus the granite counter, whether or not the floors are hardwood or they're, some kind of vinyl or linoleum, those types of things.
Oh, plays into it. Interesting. Any changes in the real or in appraisal world you see coming with just the
They're running out of appraisers.
Yeah, I know. At all those hours, that's
I'm not sure how they're going to do that and whether or not people want to put that much effort into it, because it takes a lot of energy and effort. And there's just not that many that are willing to do that.
how do you set? I know VA loan has a certain dollar amount that they'll allow for.
There's limits in different types of appraisal. It depends on who you're dealing with and that type of thing. But for me, one of the interesting things about VA is VA typically doesn't allow appraisers to appraise out of the county they live in. But for about 15 plus years, I've been appraising down in Gallatin and Park counties because they're short appraisers.
And do you set the price then?
You have some ability. The standard VA fee right now is $8.75. You have the ability to take and charge mileage and that type of thing. But typically, I just kind of eat it on my end because I don't like to charge vets.
Interesting. So you can say, yeah, I'll go there, but this is going to be my fee, and then the bank has to approve it. That sort of thing.
They're usually okay, because there's been times I've had fees, more than $1,000, but you're traveling 300-400 miles, like going down to West Yellowstone.
Yeah. Well, and if they're desperate, that's a small percent of what you're appraising. So you've got to get it done. You've got to get it done within a certain time period. So if you pick up an appraisal, the time period is got to get it back to the bank. Is there anything regimented on that, or?
Just depends on who you're dealing with. I just looked at a commercial yesterday in Helena by Canyon Ferry, and they'd like to have it back by early next week. So if they need it, I usually try to do that for them. But it just depends. There's no standard to it. And if there was, sort of like fees, I work in about 10 counties, so the fees vary all over the place. And there's been times people pay me $3,000-$4,000 to do a $20 million property down in the Yellowstone Club, Big Sky. It just depends what they need. So you quote a fee, and sometimes they already say, hey, we're willing to pay whatever to get it done because no one will do it. So you have some of that. But it requires a lot more work. So
Interesting. Hey, thank you. This is really helpful. People, they don't understand the whole process. They just know that they have to have an appraisal and not what goes into it, what goes into it from your standpoint, and how you're getting to that value, whether they agree or not. And so really appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you.